Hi everyone, this is Sayyid Irfan Ajmal again from the SIA Business Show podcast. Today I have a guest whom I have known probably for about 2 years. We have had work together on a project and it was a great experience in terms of learning and collaboration. Her name is Lisa Zahran. She is based in Malaysia. She is a terrific copywriter with over 10 years of experience writing copy and launching digital products for different entrepreneurs. She has worked with companies like Productive Muslim, Quran Academy, Mindvalley, and EverCoach. She's also the founder of Ikhlas Copywriting Academy, which is something we'll be talking about in more detail. And she's someone who has actually worked with New York Times best-selling authors, which she will be talking about. We will also talk about persuasion, the importance of words, obviously, in your copy and in your business and your sales and marketing funnel. We will also talk about some of the crossroads that she has been at, her switch from an entirely different career choice to copywriting, and a few more things, inshallah, including $1 million campaign that she had been a part of, which was instrumental in getting her very interested, much more interested in copywriting and online marketing and much more. So, Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Irfan, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me on your show. I'm truly honored to be here, and it has been really great to know you also this past 2 years and the amazing work you've been doing. So it's truly an honor to be part of this podcast.
My pleasure, and thank you for being here. And I'm looking forward to discussing a few things. Copywriting. So, Lisa, before we talk about copywriting, actually, let's talk about the Lisa who was there before copywriting and, who may have not even heard of copywriting. And, so tell me what were you like when you were growing up? What did you want to become? And what was that other career choice that you had mentioned?
Yeah, so my journey into copywriting has been not conventional. Growing up, I did love writing and I loved reading. I wanted to grow up to be some sort of writer, but it always felt like a hobby or like a far off dream because, growing up in an Asian family, science was, the usual thing, right?
Right.
And I enjoyed reading science fiction books as well. So I did enjoy science. It's not that I didn't enjoy science. And I went on to become trained in biology. I graduated in a biotech degree, and my first job, my first career after graduating was in farm technology. It was very interesting work, actually. It was very interesting work because I was, doing research for sensor technology. But at the same time, in that particular job, at the time I didn't realize it, but I was actually also getting marketing training because in that job, I was also doing market research, speaking to farmers. We were traveling across Europe and running forums and getting customer feedback to develop the product. I was part of that whole R&D process as well as the marketing and contributing in writing the 5-year business plan based on the research that we were doing. So that job had actually already sort of introduced me to copywriting, but I did not know it yet. And working in the lab was, really exciting as well to develop, the sensor technologies for the farms. And then after that, I left science eventually because when I moved back to Malaysia, my job with the farm technology was in New Zealand. When I moved back to Malaysia, there weren't so many opportunities in science that interested me. So I decided to go into pursuing writing, which, like I said earlier, was, more of a childhood thing. I enjoyed it. I enjoy reading. I just, loved expression in general, creative expression. So at the time, in terms of a job, I was working with my brother's company, which again was marketing and copywriting, but I didn't realize it was marketing and copywriting at the time. Right? I would be like the sales girl standing in the supermarket aisle, giving out samples of the baby diapers that we were selling. We were importing and distributing United Colors of Benetton diapers in Malaysia. My brother had gotten the sole distributor license for that. So I was writing brochures and I was writing, and I was like the sales sample person at the supermarket aisles, talking to customers. So honestly, at this point, I didn't even call it copywriting. I didn't know it was called copywriting. I just loved writing. So I was just like helping my brother write stuff and write the brochures and stuff.
Right.
And meanwhile, I was also freelancing for some magazines. And then after that, I decided to go into social work. And I was working with an NGO, a local nonprofit. advocating for children's rights, particularly for child sexual abuse, in the field of child sexual abuse. And as advocacy manager, I was working with the courts and I was working with education programs. And because of my skill in writing, I ended up inevitably getting all those, like writing press releases, writing this, writing that. So, and it was just something I had passion for because, it's a cause that I believed in, being able to use my skill and my joy of writing to put together a message and create education and create change in people's opinion. Again, I did not realize at the time that that is copywriting, that that is persuasive writing, something I was just not aware of. So after that, I became the magazines I was freelancing for. An opportunity opened up to me at one of the magazines I was writing for to become full-time editor. So I was a full-time editor for about 2 years. And then I got introduced into Mindvalley from there. Someone who I had met in my job as an editor in that magazine introduced me to Mindvalley and said, hey, I think you should work here. I think you're really good at what you do. There's a position open for copywriter. And I'm like, what's a copywriter? I honestly had no idea.
Can you mention what year was this when you were being approached by Mindvalley, when you were about to apply for Mindvalley?
It was 2008. Yeah, it was 2008. And
right.
I was approached by a friend who had known me through the media circle.
Right.
And he said, I think you should write for Mindvalley and
Who was
come
that?
work with us at Mindvalley. So that person was Kylie, by the way. I'm pretty sure you might know his name. Kylie. He went on to create a whole bunch of stuff outside of Mindvalley later on. But anyway,
Yeah, I'm not sure the name rings a bell, but maybe if I see his profile, then maybe I will recognize him. But I think this is around the same time when Vishen Lakhiani, the founder of Mindvalley, I think he had just moved back to Malaysia or something like that, right?
Yes,
From the States.
Mindvalley was still young at the time. When I joined Mindvalley, they were at the KL Central office, and shortly after we moved into a house. We were like a team of 20 people. It was, I guess you could call it a startup still back then, team of about 20 people working in a bungalow house in Bangsa. And it was an exciting time to be at the company and to be part of its initial growth spurt. And that was when I actually learned the term copywriting and the art of copywriting in a formal way. All this while I had been learning it in an informal way. And I mean, Kylie recognized it as copywriting is what I'd been doing. And, he recognized that I would be a good fit for the company and he suggested it to me to join. And I learned a lot from doing it informally to learning it formally and applying it in the online world. Because before I had been applying it mostly offline, like selling in supermarkets and doing advocacy work. So it was a very interesting shift. And it was also very interesting in that it combined my passion in writing and my passion for helping to create change, whether that be a social change or whether that be, supporting a particular cause or product with good values behind it. So yeah, that was my journey into copywriting.
Right. And for those who don't know, can you briefly tell us what Mindvalley is?
Mindvalley is basically an online publishing house, I guess you could say. That's probably not how they would describe themselves. They're like Hay House. They publish digital products. They are mostly in the field of education and personal development. And their mission is to provide this education to help elevate humanity. I think that's their slogan right now. Yeah. And to transform and make this education easily available to people.
Right. So when you joined Mindvalley, as you mentioned that, that's when you basically formally adopted the copywriter label. So can you tell us a bit about what copywriting is?
Copywriting is the art of persuasion in words, and it exists in everyday life. It has a lot of psychology in it. It merges a lot of psychology. Like when I started learning copywriting formally, I actually became quite overwhelmed with how much psychology was behind it. Before I had been doing it quite informally. I had just been sort of, writing from the heart. But once I learned it formally, I realized how to leverage that psychology, that understanding of human behavior to make copy more concise, more powerful, more persuasive. Whether you are selling diapers or whether you are fighting for a cause, copy, the words on paper is one form of communication that is aimed to challenge a certain belief and transform that into taking action, whatever that action may be.
Right, right. That's pretty well phrased definition, probably the best I have came across. In terms of, like you mentioned that you were working, you were doing at least some bits of copywriting in an offline world, and then with you joining Mindvalley, you went into doing online copywriting. So in your opinion, are there any major differences between copywriting in the offline world versus doing the
Oh,
same in the
yes.
online world?
Oh, yes, definitely. There are many differences. Copywriting in the online world, for a start, one of the biggest differences, which was initially very difficult for me to adapt to, was the casual tone. As working in journalists, working in press, having worked for writing press releases and advocacy statements, I had a very formal writing style. And when I went into online copywriting, it was very casual. It was like, write for a 10-year-old. These words are too big. These words are too formal. The sentence structure is too formal. Like, adapting to that was very, very difficult. But the psychology behind it is very powerful, because it really is about just creating that instant connection that online world copywriting is like talking to a friend. And when you talk to a friend, you don't speak in, formal press release sentences, right? So adapting to that as a writer was my first hurdle, and it is actually something that I think I also see people struggle with, also, at least people who are trained in writing, like I was before, although I wasn't formally trained in writing, but you know what I mean. But we've been writing for media, we've been writing for press releases, for science reports. I was trained to write for science reports, for science papers.
Yeah.
And that was a big change. That was a big difference. And the other thing about how copywriting online is different is the real time, how you have to react so fast.
Yeah.
You are not sitting down doing 2 weeks of research in a library to come up with a press release. You got to be fast. You've got to listen to social media, and you've got to react very, very quickly. And so picking up on that skill was also another challenge for me, because especially coming from the science perspective, I'm like, no, we've got to test all hypotheses first. We've got to read up all the papers first before we put anything out. We need to verify the source. I wanted to do all these things, which is just impossible when you're working online. Sometimes it's okay to just put out your opinion and you can't verify a source. That's how it works online. If you're writing an academic paper, that's different. But if you're just coming across a news article and you're just saying, hey, this is my thoughts on this news article, you don't need to dive into a whole bunch of research. You're just there to provide content. And that was also, from a science perspective, I was very resistant to that. And I'm like, we can't put out anything until we've proven it right or wrong. So that mentality, that mind shift, that we're just sitting down with a bunch of friends and conversing, like when you're sitting down with a bunch of friends and you're conversing, you don't necessarily have to say that you've done all your research. You're just like, oh, I heard about this, and this is what I think. What do you think? It's pretty much just like that. So realizing that the whole online culture is different to offline writing, but actually it is related more to offline interactions. That was a shift, but once I realized that shift and settled into that shift, it opened up a whole lot of avenues of creativity, avenues of ideas and excitement to be in this world of
Right.
marketing.
So before we move on to the next section, if you came across any interesting, relevant books just when you formally started being a copywriter with Mindvalley, any books on psychology, persuasion, copywriting, anything that helped you, which might help some of the listeners who may be having their own small businesses and startups and want to know the basics before maybe hiring a copywriter, or someone who wants to be a copywriter, anything that you can mention.
One of the books that I love is a book by Joe Sugarman. He's a legendary direct copywriter. The book is called Triggers. What I love so much about Joe Sugarman's approach to copywriting and in his book Triggers is because he comes from a very grassroots perspective, a very daily life perspective, observations of human behavior, and translates that into a copywriting psychology, into how we can use it in our marketing materials, in our writing materials. His chapters are not emails, landing pages. His chapters is like I can't remember from the top of my head, but his chapters are arranged in situations like my experience at an ice cream parlor, And then the next chapter is like walking down the street and I saw this, he was walking down the street and he saw this gate and he was just observing people. So what I love about it is that, and it resonates with me because I guess in a way that was also my entry into copywriting. I didn't study it in school. I didn't study journalism. I didn't study writing. I observed people. I felt the impact of words in my own life. I was influenced by a lot of writers that I read, a lot of authors that I read, whether fiction or nonfiction. I already understood intrinsically the power of words. And to see this perspective of teaching copywriting from that, not from, a very academic view, that's what I love about it, because it's so relatable. And that's where copywriting should come from. That's where persuasion should come from. It should come more from something you can relate to rather than it just being an academic formula. The academic formula is there to help guide you. I'm not saying it's not important at all. It is an aspect of copywriting. There are many other great copywriters who teach that. Influence by Cialdini is another book that teaches the science of copywriting in a very good way, and it's considered a marketer's Bible for good reason. And I turn back to the 6 main triggers identified by Cialdini a lot in my copywriting, even to this day, and even in F-class copywriting when I'm teaching other people how to write copy. So you do need that scientific structure as well. But if you can't relate it to your life, the art of persuasion in your own life, in your own observations, when you're walking down the street, you're not going to capture the true essence of copywriting, what I think is the true essence of copywriting, which is speaking heart to heart. If you were trying to convince someone else to change their heart, you got to speak from your heart too. It's as simple as that. So that's what I love about Joe Sugarman's book, Triggers. So between the two, between Cialdini's book, Influence, and Joe Sugarman's book, Triggers, if there are only 2 books of copywriting you read, it's these 2.
Wonderful. Influence was already on my reading list. It's already on my Audible, but I have yet to read it, and I will be definitely reading Joe Sugarman's Triggers as well. So, what happened after Mindvalley? I know you had mentioned some of the challenges that you had, or if you want to talk about what happened after Mindvalley.
So, my journey after Mindvalley, the reason I decided to go on my own was because, put it this way, it was really exciting to learn about copywriting with Mindvalley. And as I learned more about copywriting, as I learned to put my own soul into copywriting, like I said, as I began to discover that copywriting is persuasion and that persuasion needs to come from the heart for it to be most effective. As I realized that this was not just an academic thing and I began to put my heart and my soul into every copy that I write, it became difficult when I came across a project that I didn't believe in, or that I didn't connect to in some way or another, or that conflicted with me in some way or another. So when you're working for a publishing house, it's impossible to, and multiple authors and multiple products, it's impossible to agree with everything.
Right.
And it was difficult as an employee to pick and choose your projects. You're being hired, to work full time and pick and to do what comes your way. And while I loved some of the projects and believed some of the products and loved some of the authors that I worked with because I resonated with their message, there were others that I did not. That's why I decided to leave and go freelance. And as a freelancer, I could pick and choose my projects. And I did still, and I do still continue to this day to work for Mindvalley and for EverCoach in particular, as those were some of the projects that I enjoyed doing. So I kept in touch with some of the project managers in there who, went on and also did their own companies while also still working with Mindvalley, such as people like Ajit Nawalka, who co-founded EverCoach with Mindvalley. And that has made it more exciting for me also, made things, it brought a new dynamic to my business and to my copywriting career, because now I was, going out and really pursuing my heart and really helping the people whose message I believed in or shared in one way or another. As a copywriter, contributing to that, contributing to getting their message out, contributing to getting their products and services out. One of which was Productive Muslim, whom I had actually been a follower as a reader for 2 years. And then when I saw that they were looking for writers to join their team, I applied, alhamdulillah. I was, interviewed and accepted into their team, and I worked with them for 2 years. as a contributor and as a content editor and as a copywriter, working alongside, Brother Faris, Brother Muhammad Faris, and Brother Atif Khalil. It was, a great time working together with them. And, from there, I was able to also write and learn about something I was passionate about at the same time. And of course, alhamdulillah, it also opened a lot of other avenues for me. It also introduced me to Quran Academy and also other businesses as well, not necessarily just in the Muslim world. So yeah, it was a good transition. It was again a different challenge when working for yourself versus working in the comfort and security of a company. Many different pros and cons, but I absolutely loved it. I still do.
Right, right. Can you also mention a bit more details about the $1 million campaign that you spoke to me about before we started this recording? The one which you had in Mindvalley, I believe.
Oh yes, that was the first $1 million campaign that I was involved in Mindvalley, and they've had a few. Amazing company to learn from. So this was when I was still, I think it was still in the first 6 months of being at Mindvalley. I think definitely the first year, perhaps the first 6 months or so. How Mindvalley is structured is at the time is they would have different project managers on different teams, and in each different team there would be an assigned copywriter, designer, etc. We worked in teams of about 4 or 5, and the goal at the time was launching one product a week across the whole company, with every single team working on about 1 or 2 product launches a month. So it was quite intense. And at that time when I was working on this launch, I still remember I think it was called The Science of Getting Rich. It was a Bob Proctor product. And at that time, Law of Attraction book was really big. And Bob Proctor was, one of the people that was interviewed in that movie, The Secret, which was, really huge at the time. And so we were launching this product, The Science of Getting Rich. And I had written a landing page for the launch. I had written a landing page with the book, and the landing page did really, really well, getting about 70 or 80% conversions, which is way above industry standard. So we were writing, I remember sitting down writing the sales sequence. And, as a writer, when you look at the computer screen, it's just you and a Word document, and it's words on a paper. You don't actually see the impact. You don't feel the impact because you're not in front of a person. It's different to offline marketing, right? When I'm a sales girl, in the supermarket aisle, giving out a diaper sample, I'm answering the questions of the person. It's a direct conversation. So it's like a different thing. And to experience when you're writing, you're like writing to somebody in a conversation, but there's no one there. So copywriting at that time, to me, up to that point, it felt like a bubble. It didn't feel real yet to me. So what was different about that campaign is that after we launched it, after we had a pre-launch campaign with the landing page and everything, and then on the day that we released the first sales email, on that day of that launch, I remember we all sat down in front of the computer, me and the 2 project managers, the computer guy. We were all sitting down, 4 of us, in front of the monitor, watching the sales come in from the moment we clicked send. The first sale came in within minutes, I think within seconds. And by 10 minutes, gone up to hundreds, and within an hour, it had been thousands of dollars in sales. And by the end of the week, it reached a million, But that first hour, just watching those sales come in and knowing that just last week, I was just by myself sitting in front of the computer, writing these emails, like to people, talking to people that I was not seeing. And then to realize, like sitting in front of that screen, seeing the results go out, to realize that those are my words that they're reading right now, that's making them choose to buy, put in their credit card details, and get this program. That was when it really hit me what we are actually doing, what I'm actually doing, and how much power words have in this online world, in offline as well, obviously.
Right.
But,
Wonderful.
to me, that was the introduction into online sales.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got very excited. If it's okay, I would love to ask a few more follow-up questions on this campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that there were 4 to 5 people in this team. So if you can, tell us what were the responsibilities of every team member, and, what was your role in terms of, the activities that you did. I believe you mentioned writing a sales sequence, which I believe is a series of emails, and the landing page copy. So, a little more detail about both these aspects.
Sure. Okay. So we had a project manager, and her role was to coordinate everything, coordinate the copy, deadlines, the design deadlines, make sure that everything's on track, setting up everything, autoresponders, working with, tech, computer, making sure that, the tech side of things
Yeah.
to make sure that everything is smooth on the back end. And then we also have an overall project manager who works with the overall project manager is someone who works with that project manager, but someone who also works with the higher management. So he
Right.
worked with Vision's team as well. So what happens is that every month, Vision would have a team with all top project managers to strategically plan out what products and what authors are going to be launched this month. Like I said, we were launching one product a week, so there was a lot of planning, and they would do this planning month in advance or even quarterly in advance, right?
Right.
So that person will then work with every member of that team will then work with a few project managers, and then each project manager with their own team. You following me so far, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying that it was 1 to 2 projects being launched every week by the entire team or by every sub team of 4 or 5 people?
No, every sub team would be maybe one or two products a month, but across the whole company, the goal was one per week, one or two per week.
Okay, right. And so in your team, there was the project manager who was obviously, working on execution, making sure that, everyone is working in sync and everything is, according to the deadlines. There was a designer, there was you who was the copywriter. Who else was there?
There was also the project manager strategist, the one that works with Vision. So he works directly with my project manager. My project manager reports directly to him. And then occasionally, once a week, he would also have a meeting with all the sub teams. So I think, and the top management team of project managers, I think maybe there was about 4 or 5 at the time.
Right.
And then also in each division, there were also different teams. So as a copywriter, there were many copywriters also in Mindvalley. So we would also have our own individual meetings to discuss the copy that we were doing, and we would help each other across the projects, critique each other to help improve each other's copies. So it's not just the sub team of the project manager. I was also part of the sub team of copywriters, and the lead copywriter, whom at the time was Kenneth Yu, brilliant copywriter, by the way, and whom I learned a lot from. So he would train us, he would go through our copy, he would help improve things, and then after it gets his approval, then I submit my copy to my project manager, and the project manager gets the approval from the strategist, project manager, and then it goes to design. So that was, for my work, it was done. Once it goes to design, it was done there. Of course, I do a bit of proofreading after design was done, the usual stuff.
Right.
So there were many parallel systems in play at the time, and that's very pivotal to Mindvalley's growth. And that was the genius of Vision's leadership, is creating all these systems and processes that allowed for exponential growth.
Right. Wonderful. So the designer, when you say it was a designer who was working with you in the team, would it be someone who had, say, skills in something like lead pages or ConvertKit, like, one of these landing page softwares? Or would it be someone who was, who had like, Photoshop skills, if you know what I mean?
The designers at Mindvalley were also developers. I mean, they could code themselves. Mindvalley was not using any third party. They were using their own.
Right.
They weren't necessarily working with lead pages. There were times that they did, use the third party software and stuff, but a lot of it was proprietary Mindvalley stuff. They were programmers, developers, coders, and designers.
Okay.
Team in itself.
So would you say that at this stage, when you were doing this launch and, reaching to $1 million in sales in about 1 week, when it comes to, marketing, like getting those initial eyeballs to get the ball rolling, would you say that Mindvalley was at a stage where, the incoming traffic of Mindvalley from, existing visitors was big enough to get the, initial traffic to your product's landing page? Obviously, you mentioned that, it was 70 to 80% conversion rate. So, definitely that's something that I would say, several times more than what a normal conversion rate is. So good job on that. But like my question is, since there was no marketer in your team, was it the overall Mindvalley's marketing team efforts that brought that initial traffic? And was it something that was already there in the website? You know what I mean?
You're talking about how many people were already in Mindvalley's subscription list to achieve those kind of high numbers?
Yeah, partly that as well. But all I mean is, like, you mentioned the team, and I can see that there is no marketer in the individual product teams, right? The teams that are working on different product launches. So what I'm saying is, was the marketing being done by, was there like a separate marketing team that was working on, increasing the traffic for the overall website? And, that was basically helping to get traffic to, individual product pages and different products.
Oh yeah, I mean the sub teams did that. Our project managers was also handling the marketing side, the blogs, keyword research, all the marketing thing that goes on in between launches as well. That is also what the overall project manager and we as copywriters also did. Like part of my job in Mindvalley is not just going from launch to launch, but in between also writing those blog posts, also writing copy for the social media, also writing copy for newsletters. That was all standard work throughout, with or without a launch. So when we have those launch times once or twice a month in our sub teams,
Right.
it would be on top of the existing work. So it would be overtime.
Right. So, what are some of the key ingredients that a landing page should have from the perspective of a copywriter like yourself, who has worked on, $1 million campaigns and who has worked with, New York Times best-selling authors?
Key elements of a landing page: headline and subheadline, and pre-headline. The three things: pre-headline, headline, subheadline. Yeah, after that would be an opening. Now, the
Right.
opening is what I call setting up the stage. It sets up the headlines, grab attention, it grabs the people that you are speaking to, right?
Right.
And then that opening paragraph, it sets up the stage. It will be the frame of your entire landing page. That is where we either frame the problem or frame the solution. Whatever it is, it's framing. And then after that introduction paragraph, bullet points. So those bullet points then fill in the frame, right? You're starting putting the content of that. You've already got people's attention, you've got the structure, and now you're putting in the details into that structure. So that's your bullet points. And this is where whatever it is that you're asking people to sign up for, whether it's an ebook, whether it's a video series, or whether it's a 5-day challenge, those bullet points are going to be very key in convincing people to take action, which is to sign up for whatever it is you're doing, to take action. And so your bullet points need to show the benefits. Your bullet points need to also show that you understand their pain. It can't be an egotistical view of just, this is what I do, this is what I've created. It needs to relate to them. And by that, I go back to Joe Sugarman, like go back to the philosophy of how Joe Sugarman approaches copy, how he persuades from the heart, right? So that's the essence of it. And in terms of making sure you have all the triggers, I go back to CLTV, right? Your social trigger, your social proof, your authority, all those. Those bullet points will actually be the meat of everything. But for the bullet points to be effective, it needs to be within that frame of the introduction and within that headline and subheadline that grabs the attention in the first place. Bullet points will not survive on its own, even though it's the most important part of the persuasion, it's the heart of the landing page, but it won't survive on its own. It needs the rest of the body to support it. And then another important element would be a profile of some sort, whether it's an author or whether it's a company. There has to be something about, like, who is this from? People always want to know who this is from. There's authority in it. It gives credibility. We need to know who we're learning from. As humans, that is just one of the important triggers. We want to trust the people that we're learning from. We want to like the people that we're learning from. Likability is one of the triggers that Cialdini mentions. So those are the most important elements of a landing page. Now, whether these elements are in the form of video or in the form of words, copy, the copywriting that goes into the video script, it's still the science and the soul of copywriting. I see this debate go on all the time, like copy is dead, video is king, like forget copywriting, it's all about video now, people just want to watch video. To me, I think that's just looking at the form over the function. The function and the psychology of writing copy of video scripts, or whatever form it is in, whether it's infographics, people are saying copy is not needed anymore because infographics are the in thing. It's not about the form. Even in an infographic, you have the psychology of copy in that, in the creation of graphics, in the creation of video. Even in design, how the design complements the copy. And I often work with designers to make sure that the design and the copy complement each other. So it is bigger than just the words on the page. As a copywriter, sometimes I think the title copywriting doesn't quite encapsulate what we actually do, because there's so much more that goes into it. And there's a lot of people that actually contribute to copywriting. Designers, for example, is one. So that is I know I've digressed a little bit from landing page, but those are the elements of the landing page and the psychology of copywriting that goes into the landing page, whichever form it takes in words, video, infographics, etc.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. In fact, you answered one of the questions that I was planning to ask on, what are your thoughts on, video and other content formats. So that makes total sense. So in terms of, there is headline, sub-headline, and then there is bullet points where we would, mention the pain points of the potential audience members, and we would mention the benefits of our product or service. Then there is the company's profile or the person's profile, who, and maybe, some sort of social proof on, who that person or company is, what they have done. What would be next after that? Would there be like, a prize? Would there be a CTA?
Yes, and then of course the CTA, the call to action button, which, there's a lot of advice out there on how to create a snappy call to action button. Words like now, words that trigger, that make you feel scarcity, in that scarcity is one of the triggers, Aldine, you mentioned. So when you say like buy now, you're sort of creating that time scarcity. Implicitly, you're creating that time scarcity because you're like, this is the moment now, like you're not going to have this opportunity later. So that's why now works so well. You don't necessarily have to include it all the time. I'm just saying this is just one of the powerful words to use in a CTA. But one thing for sure is that don't make call to action so vague. And it has to also link back to what you were saying, right? So if if the heart of your message was like about transformation, right? Like transform your life, for example, if that was the heart of your message, and even if you had not used phrase transform your life in the copy before, but that was essentially what you were saying, if your call to action then is transform your life now, that's going to be what's powerful. So a powerful call to action is not, again, it's not in a bubble. It is the punchline to everything you've said. So it depends also on what you have previously written or what you have previously got on your landing page. It needs to encapsulate the key reason you sat down and wrote that piece. It needs to encapsulate the key change you want to make, your why to this. So short, snappy, and purposeful. That is what makes a good CTA.
Right. You mentioned, how scarcity can work very well. And, I do understand the concept, but how do you think scarcity should be used without, negatively impacting one's reputation or one's moral code, where it remains genuine, but you still get across the message that, this is something that will not be there forever or something like that?
Scarcity is one of the most powerful triggers, but also one of the most abused. Because it's so powerful and because it's so easy to use, it has been abused a lot for what I believe is the wrong reasons, which is just to make a sale or just for the sake of trying to get your conversion numbers up. And that can ruin your reputation, because if it's not honest, people are going to know it. People are going to see through it. It just doesn't make any sense, for example, for something to be limited to 1,000 digital copies. We know digital copies technically infinite, right?
Yeah.
So how can there be 1,000 limited digital copies? And words like it will be taken down forever after March 20th, for example. And then 2 months later, you see it up again, and only the date has changed. Like it will be taken down in April 20th or whatever, right? So if you're using scarcity for short-term gain, you are going to lose long-term for sure. You're going to lose long-term sales. You're going to lose long-term reputation. You're going to lose long-term credibility.
Yeah.
So scarcity is powerful because when it is honest, scarcity itself is scarce, put it this way. It doesn't happen very often. Scarcity itself is scarce. It is not all the time that you're going to do a live event, correct? It's impossible for any author, however big their career they are, to do a live event every day, in a year. You're probably going to do a live event, for example, if you're doing a workshop live event on stage, you're like Tony Robbins and you're doing a world tour. It is scarce for him to be in your city,
Yeah.
right? Doing a talk. So when that happens, that's when you can really push for that scarcity, because people know it is scarce. So use it wisely and use it very carefully. A simple rule of thumb is you use it honestly, it in itself is scarce. You will not abuse it and people will trust you and it will work for you long term.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just very quickly share a couple of brief examples. Neil Patel is someone whose content I learn a lot from, and definitely he's, someone whom tons of people learn from when it comes to, digital marketing, especially SEO, content marketing, etc. And I don't know if he still does that or not, but a little while ago, maybe a few months ago, he had this webinar on his page. And if you are not careful and if one is not very tech savvy, one would not realize it. But, there's that fake urgency where he would be like, where the copy says that, okay, this is a live webinar where, you can ask questions from Neil Patel, blah, 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 something like that. I can be incorrect about some of the details. Basically, it was an automated webinar. And, the comments that they are coming, they are not live, but they're already pre-fed into the webinar system. So I get an email that, I can attend the webinar on X date or on Y date. But whenever I attended, I would see pre-recorded webinar, which is being marketed as a live webinar. And, I mean, sure, automation and everything like that, marketing technology, all of that is great, but, that shouldn't come at expense of, honesty and all that. And then there is another example where it's very funny that I see this example from a company as big as New York Times. So when I go to Twitter, I am shown an ad from New York Times quite often. Maybe it's going on for like at least 2 or 3 months, where the copy says that, New York Times for only $1. I can subscribe to the digital edition for $1. That's the ad. And I'm told that, I have just 24 hours to do this. But it's there for so many months. So it's not 24 hours. So don't say 24 hours if it's not 24 hours. Maybe, add some cost to it every day with an automated script or something that, hey, you could have gotten this for $1 yesterday and now it's $2. I don't know. I'm just saying that it doesn't come across very good, and it made me to, not take New York Times as seriously as I would have if it was a real scarcity.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, New York Times, I've seen those ads as well. They are a reputable news agency. And unfortunately, when ads like this can catch you out and can catch readers who start to see it, it can actually bring down the credibility of their news. I know the
Yeah.
marketing team is different to the journalist team of the New York Times. And that's kind of sad that the marketing team is kind of now impacting how we view them in total and the credibility in total. So you
Yeah.
don't want this to happen to you or your company. So it's important that all your teams, especially if you're CEO of the company, you've got many divisions to look at marketing, you've got sales, you've got your management team. It's very important that you make sure that nobody is basically doing anything that can hurt the other team's reputation, because from the outside, people are going to see this. People are going to see you as one. People are not going to see like, oh, their marketing team is not being honest, but at least their journalism is honest. People are not going to think that. People are going to see you as a whole brand. So it's important to be consistent. And I really stress the thing about honesty, because if you're honest, there really is nothing that can go wrong. If somebody wants to claim that you've been lying, if you have been honest, that you can show the proof that you were not. So there are some things that work. For example, let me talk about extensions, right? Sometimes there was a deadline, like this event, we're closing the deadline for registration on so and so date, right? And then like a few days after the date closed, you get an email saying like, hey, due to popular demand, we have decided to extend it by 2 other days. So you still have a chance to get in. There's still 10 slots remaining or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or we have added another 10 slots. Now we see this go around a lot. I know some people, I know some campaigns, and I've worked on some campaigns where this was premeditated. They did this on purpose. There was, whether there is or people writing in saying, oh, I missed out on the thing. They just know that this copy strategy works. So they put it in weeks in advance. To me, I feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. Because if you're on the list for a long time, you're going to see this pattern a lot. From launch to launch to launch, you're going to see this, oh, this happens all the time. And after a while, you're just not going to listen to the closing date. And then the effect of the scarcity is lost on any future campaign. So, but when it happens for real, and I have been on programs where that does happen for real, it is going to show that it is real, because people on social media, because if people have been writing to you and if people on social media have been saying to you, I missed out on the date, I got the time zones confused, please, I want to be in. If people are actually really saying that, and if you really do extend because of the feedback, that proof is going to show, because people on social media are going to be telling you, wow, thank you for extending it, I've just signed up. That buzz is going to be there. People are going to be replying your emails, and you can post a screenshot of that saying like, wow, I'm happy that we extended this because like this person now joined and she's really happy. And that is going to build up for you as well. That's going to work for you long term and short term. So truly, if it's honest, it will work out for you. And that's as simple as it can be.
Definitely makes total sense. It's important to, keep long-term goals in sight and not, come across as desperate. If a company is, relaxing the deadlines on every single campaign, then, people will find out, as you mentioned. We briefly mentioned New York Times. I'm very curious on finding out who were the New York Times best-selling authors that you worked with. I can sort of guess as that one would be Vishen Lakhiani, the CEO of Mindvalley. Can you confirm that? And who was the other NYT best-selling author?
I didn't actually work with Vision on his book launch, so I wasn't part of that. I know the copywriter who was, he's
Right.
brilliant. I recently worked with Matthew Jackson. He wrote the book Retirement Dreammaker, which was on the New York Best Seller list a few weeks ago.
Sorry,
So that's my recent project.
can you repeat the name of the author and the book again?
The book is called The Retirement Dreammaker,
Okay.
and it was written by Matthew Jackson.
Okay, wonderful. So you worked on this particular book with Matthew?
The book launch.
Okay, the book launch.
So I worked on launching the book.
Right.
I worked on the campaign that helped get it on the international New York Times bestselling list.
Right, wonderful.
So the website, the landing page,
Yep.
the emails, the sales emails, all that. So another author I worked with also to bring her book to international bestselling status on the New York Times was Dr. Nita Bhushan and her book Emotional Grit.
Emotional Grit?
Yeah, by
Right.
Dr. Nita Bhushan.
Nita?
Yeah.
Right, Nita Bushra.
Bhushan, Bhushan.
Bhushan. Right. Okay. We will put all these names and book links, etc., in the show notes as well. So we already talked about the anatomy of a great landing page, and you shared some really good thoughts, and I will definitely be thinking about those while updating my own website. But in terms of email marketing, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs and startups on, how to do it right while running a campaign or, just staying in touch with their subscribers list in general?
When it comes to emails, my number one advice is be very careful not to overwhelm your readers. We are in a digital age of so much information, of information overload. And one of the things is, our email inbox is also another form of clutter. Many people use the same email address for everything, whether it's their Domino's subscription or their work. And it can be very, 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 very overwhelming. So my biggest advice when it comes to email marketing is be very careful you don't overwhelm your users. So if you have a lot of information that you want to put it on a blog, put it in a video, put it on social media. In your email, keep it nice and short, keep it compelling, and then send them to the blog or the video or whatever to read more, to listen or to watch something. When I get emails, and I subscribe to a lot of emails because I study how people write emails, I study the people I follow, I study other marketers, and other entrepreneurs. So sometimes I see this pattern, especially when people have something exciting to share. And it's good if you have something exciting to share, that's great, but then it's all in the email. And it's like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, and it's so overwhelming. Or they will blast you every day. It's like maybe they just it's not a launch. It's like I'm on holiday in Europe and every day I'm getting an update about your holiday in Europe. I'm like, put it on a blog. Don't send it in email. It's too much, right? And that's people are going to unsubscribe from you really fast if you overwhelm them. Remember, we are in information overload. Emails are like a knock on the door. It's like knocking on the door and saying, hey, you want to go watch the Avengers movie with me? It's really awesome. It's got really great reviews. Yeah, okay, I've booked tickets. Yeah, here it is. Let's go. That's that. It's that invitation. That's the knock on the door. You're interrupting someone. When you're writing an email, you're interrupting someone. They could be doing something else and then the email comes in, or they could be multitasking, talking to their children, or having dinner with their friends, and then they are checking their emails. Remember, you're knocking on the door, you're interrupting somebody. The email is permission for people to make the decision, oh, I want to know more about this, and then you have their attention. Don't knock on the door, barge in, think you have their attention, and then just spill out everything. So that's my number one key advice. Whether you are writing a launch or whether you are just staying in touch with your subscription list, beware of that overwhelm. Remember that the email is just a knock on the door and it's just like, hey, it's me, what you doing? I just want to tell you about this. You want to go? Something like that. Yeah?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And, I suffer the same thing when I would get email from people and companies who maybe sending too many emails, and then there is often too much information in the same email. And the analogy that you use is really good. But would you say, and I have to admit that I have this habit of going into too much details when I'm writing an email. Like, for instance, when I was asking you to be a guest on the show, right? So you must have noticed how much detailed I try to be. So do you think that it's okay to go into details after, the initial knock has been answered, and sort of, providing the details? Because the alternative to email then is, a phone call or in-person meeting. And, in case of phone calls and in-person meeting, there are a lot of, scheduling difficulties, and, making sure that, for instance, the reason I prefer written communication, I guess, is also because everything is documented, right? So it's not like I say one thing and the other person has, misinterpreted it or misheard something, or vice versa. So what are your thoughts on that? Is it okay to go into more details sometimes? And I do know I have to improve my ability to write more brief emails.
Okay, so if it is planned sequence of emails, a strategic launch, and something where you build up the communication, then yes, it's okay to go more into detail for the emails. So your very first email of that sequence is going to be that very first knock, and you give them that teaser. And you're like, okay, I've got this and this and this. I want to tell you more about this. I'm going to tell you more about it tomorrow, about 24 hours from now. People are already expecting that. You've already framed for people to expect that. You've already planted that seed of curiosity. And, if you've written it well, you've planted the seed of curiosity where they're like, okay, I'm going to make a point to read this email tomorrow because I want to know more about this and this and this. And then you've given yourself permission in that second email to go into more detail. So this is where sales emails are like a launch sequence begins that way. When you look at the overall triggers in that sales email, it's actually a condensed sales page that has been strategically split into mini conversations, right? Hey, there's this, check this out. I'll tell you more about it tomorrow. Hey, there's this, and da da da. That reminds me of something else. I don't have time to go into it today. I'll tell you more about it tomorrow. And so on and so forth. When you strategically map out your content like that in an email sequence, in a launch, then yes. But if you're just ranting and you're not planning it out, you're just going. And this is what I was like before I learned copywriting formally. When I was inadvertently found myself doing marketing work, doing copywriting work, but didn't actually realize that there was a term to it, that there was a study to it. I was like that. I was just like, oh, I should say this and I should say that next. And it was very haphazard. And while it did provide some results, looking back in hindsight, there was so much improvement that could have happened if it had just been planned properly around build up, planned properly around the scarcity, planned properly around the triggers, right? When planning, most importantly, is respect. There's this term in cooking, and my mom says this to me all the time when I'm in the kitchen cooking. She says, respect the knife. And many chefs also say this. They say, respect the knife. When you respect the knife, your cooking will be brilliant. It will be like tasty, it will be everything, and you won't cut yourself. Respect the knife. It's the number one rule of chefs. It's something my mom has always taught me also. If you think about that, when you enter the kitchen with that mindset to respect the knife, you're very careful in everything you do, in everything you slice, in everything you put together in the recipe. You're not just haphazardly just trying to get dinner done or whatever, right?
Right.
It's the same thing when you are writing. Respect is there. Whether, respect the keyboard or respect the people that you're writing to, right? Respect their time. Respect their emotions, right? You're not just going to do offline. Being online and being anonymous doesn't give you the permission to behave in a way that you wouldn't behave offline. If you won't barge into someone's room without announcing or without making a prior appointment and then expect them to listen to you for 3 minutes, right? When they have no idea what you're talking about, right? Or you haven't made an appointment. If you won't do that in real life, why would you do that in email? But the anonymity of the email and the impersonal nature of writing digitally, sometimes we forget that we are actually still dealing with people's real time and people's real attention. So respect that.
Right. Wonderful. These are all excellent points. Just a couple of questions before we can conclude this episode. What would be some key things any entrepreneur should ask from a copywriter while working with them on a project, or, hiring them as an employee?
One of the most important things I think that you should consider when you're hiring a copywriter or you plan to work with a copywriter is that your values are aligned and that there is a way or some sort of passion. It doesn't have to be 100% exactly like you, but there is a relation. They can relate to your passion in one way or another. They can relate to your values in one way or another. They can be the best copywriter, they can have the best experience, but if they do not resonate with your values or if they do not feel your passion or if they're not driven by your passion and values, they may be like, oh yeah, hey, what you're doing is great, but I don't relate to it. That's not good because the copywriter is going to be the heart of the message that goes out. They can't connect with it, then the words they write and your audiences are not going to connect with it. So make sure that the connection is there. After all the usual stuff like, your experience, writing samples, all that stuff, you got to make sure that that connection factor is there.
Right. So, for instance, do you think that leads to a follow up question? Do you think that for copywriters, like for instance, I will use you as an example. Okay. So, for instance, if I am starting a biotech startup, okay, so should it be better for me to work with someone like Lisa, who has background in biotech in terms of her educational qualification and also, in terms of her experience? Or should that not be a qualifying factor?
It would depend on the comfort level of the copywriter in their willingness to learn new terms. So, for example, yes, it would be an advantage for someone like me to come on board because I'm already familiar with all the terms of biotech. I don't need to ask, so many questions. I can, freely do my own research and I can understand the gist of everything. But even so, if I do not resonate with the project, even if it may be in the field of my expertise, but if the particular project, for example, had something to do with, let's say, plant microbiology or something like that, right? When it comes to biotech, my excitement is more in medical technology. If, for example, it was in a particular field where I wasn't too particularly interested in the purpose or the goal or the hypothesis of the project, while I am technically able to do it, I may not be so excited. So I would then say that it's not a qualifying factor. Now, if on the other hand, you had someone who was an environmentalist, may not be a biotechnologist, may not know the terms of biotechnology and all that kind of stuff, but he or she happens to be an environmentalist who is excited to work in this plant microbiology area that could help revive a species or something like that, right? And they have copywriting skills, then I would say if that copywriter was excited about the project and the comfort level of learning about the new terms of biotechnology and they're comfortable with that, then I would say that's a better candidate. Connection to the purpose is, I would say, trumps expertise in the field.
Wonderful. That's a good way to conclude this episode. Thank you so much, Lisa. Do you have any words, any sort of final message before you leave? I believe you have an interesting copywriting ebook that you can mention. You can tell more about it to the audience. And also, how can our listeners reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
Sure. I do have an ebook right now. It's on the mindsets of copywriting and it's called Unleash Your True Voice, 5 Copywriting Mindsets to Influence, Create Impact, and Boost Sales Through the Written Word. It's on my website, ikhlascopywriting.com. And the ebook is targeted to Muslim entrepreneurs, but I feel that it's also a universal message and that people can learn from because it covers being honest in sales and how that can actually help your sales. A lot of people have this perception, this mindset that in order to do sales, we need to lie, we need to be that snake's oil salesman, right? And there's this bad rap about sales being a manipulative thing. So the essence of my book is that actually the best sales come from love and honesty and integrity. And yeah, so I mean, if you would be interested to know a bit more about that, it's just a very short ebook that's available on my site.
Wonderful, Lisa. That sounds like a very good concept. Having done some corporate sales for Fortune 500 companies, not for Fortune 500 companies, but the company that I was working for was targeting Fortune 500 companies. And we would have to use some of that fake scarcity and, dishonesty. And I never felt comfortable with that, which is why I left that job quite quickly. So I think I will also be reading this book on how honesty and trust and love and care for your consumers in your sales process can actually be a good thing for both sides. So would your website Ikhlas Copywriting also be the best way to reach out if any of the listeners want to contact you?
Yes, that would be the best way. You can just drop me an email. Usually, email is the best way to contact me. I'm also on Facebook. You can join a class copywriting group on Facebook, and Messenger is also another way to contact me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really enjoyed learning about copy marketing and your journey from being a biotech professional to being a copywriter who has worked on $1 million campaigns and with New York Times bestselling authors. And I wish you good luck on your journey. I know you have just started a coaching academy as well. So I wish you good luck on that as well. And we will include all the links to your website and the ebook and everything in the show notes. For dear listeners, don't forget to check out the ebook. I think it's something that you will definitely love. Lisa, thank you once again, and I wish you good luck with everything.
And thank you, Irfan, for holding the space for me and for giving way for exciting conversation. I really enjoy being on this show with you, and I look forward to seeing all the other interviews that you have on your show.
Thanks, Lisa. My pleasure.